Hello and welcome to this Astranti video. We'll be taking a look at a snippet from our brand new Excel Expert course. To make sure it's something really valuable to you, we asked our accountants what Excel skills they find the most useful in their day-to-day work. And the answer was more or less unanimous: pivot tables. So we're sharing part one of the course module on pivot tables, led by our expert tutor, Jordan, who I'll hand over to now.
So to start with, what are pivot tables? Well, pivot tables are a way of aggregating and summarizing data from a much larger and more extensive table, such as this sales report for Electromax we have here. The benefit of a pivot table is that you can take this large range of data and then manipulate the categories of each column, or row for that matter, and have it present something in a different way so that you can make a more informed analysis. It's an incredibly useful tool, and it's often used when trying to create dashboards within Excel because of the flexibility that it gives you when it comes to manipulating data. So I suppose the first thing we need to do then, as per the first activity, is actually learn how to insert a pivot table. And what we need to do is create 3 of them. So to start with, what you need to do is click the Insert ribbon at the top of Excel. Click Insert, and then what you'll see in the bottom left here underneath the File and Home ribbon is the Pivot Table button. So you'll want to click that, and what you'll see then is the option to select a range. Now, because of the way I've set up this workbook, it's identified that there is a table here called Sales Report, and so it's already highlighted the whole thing for me. But let's say you didn't have that. Well, what you'd have to do is click in the Excel workbook and drag over the table range that you want to insert a pivot table for. But we have that already for this, so I'm just going to re-highlight the whole thing. And there we go. Now, so that's our table range that we need to source the data from. What we need to now do is choose a location to insert the pivot table. As a note, you can't have pivot tables overlapping each other, so you have to put some forethought into where you're going to put the pivot tables. As you start manipulating with fields, the pivot tables can end up overlapping each other, and Excel will stop you from doing it. So a little bit of forethought is required. So we have to choose where we want to put it. You can either choose a new worksheet, which will create a new worksheet down here, but we've already got one. We've got one called Pivot Table at the bottom. So we want to click Existing Worksheet. Then we want to click Pivot Table. And you can see the Pivot Table worksheet has been populated here. And what we're going to do, if you follow along, you're going to put the pivot table in cell B3. Okay, that's where your first pivot table is going to be. So click OK, and you can see we now have our first pivot table, but we need to do it 2 more times. So what you need to do is go back to the sales report spreadsheet, go back to Insert, click Pivot Table, click Existing Worksheet, go to Pivot Table Worksheet, and we'll put this one in H3 this time, so put it in H3. And then our third and final pivot table, if I just go to the Existing Worksheet, Pivot Table, we'll put this in N3 as well. There we go. And you know what? What I'm going to do is just very quickly move it over just slightly, so that way just a little bit more on screen for everyone's convenience. Oh, 1 second. I had not highlighted the whole thing. So if you want to drag a pivot table around, you need to highlight the whole box. Then just grab the edges and move it around. Okay, so we have our 3 pivot tables. That's activity 1 done. Now we need to configure them, because right now there's no data here. So if I click on the pivot table, you can see that the top of the ribbon has changed. We've now got a pivot table analyze ribbon and a design ribbon. Now if you want to manipulate the pivot table, what you need to do is bring up the field list. And the field list is shown in the show section of the pivot table analyze ribbon. So on the far right here, if you click field list, you'll see this pop out on the right side of your screen. And what you'll notice is that it's populated with the various column headers from the original table. So what will happen is that when I click these different fields, they'll be populated into one of these 4 categories. And these 4 areas will dictate how the table is structured. So for example, buyers will go in rows, product category will go in columns, and then we need a set of values and that will go in values. Let me show you. The first one we need to produce is a pivot table that shows the sales and quantity sold to customers. So What we need to do is firstly pick our buyers, okay? We need a list of all the buyers the company has sold items to. So if we click that, we can see that buyers has been put into the rows field area. And if we look on the pivot table, we can see that being reflected. The customers in this pivot table, or sorry, in this sales report, okay? So look, we've got all these customers. There are definitely duplicates there. That's the full list there in the filter list. You can see that that has populated the rows for our pivot table. Then what we need to do is add two values. We need to have it so that it's the customers and the sales and quantity that those customers purchased. So if we click sales, you can see we've got our sum of sales column here now because it's gone into values. We're showing the value of the sales we're showing how much a particular customer purchased in terms of sales revenue. And then we need to also click the order quantity field, and that will populate into the values column as well. And that will show us the sum of order quantity. So this is the total amount in units a particular customer has purchased from us. So the next step now is to create a second pivot table. This one we need to do sales by product category and product. So the first one is product category. If we go back to our sales report real quickly, we can see that we've got different product categories for different products. So one product might be DIY equipment, another product might be wiring tools, etc., etc., etc. So we've got our different product categories here. Then if we click product, what you'll see is something quite neat, where essentially, because of the way the sales report is formatted, it knows that DIY equipment is essentially the Ashen and Trivs. Okay, these two are considered DIY equipment according to the sales report spreadsheet. Same thing for Extra and Vellum, and so on and so on. The benefit of this is that we can then decide how much of it we want to see. We can either see all just the product categories, or we can see a breakdown of not only the product categories, but what is also inside the product categories as well, i.e. the individual products. Now, what use is this? Well, we need to show the sales by product category and product. So if we click sales, now we not only get the breakdown of the products, but we get to see how much a particular category generated in sales and what each individual product generated in sales as well. And so this is the amazing thing about pivot tables, that you can manipulate this data very easily. And this is far easier to read and understand than it is to look at the sales report and try to glean that information from here. Much faster and much easier to do it using a pivot table. Our final pivot table we need to do then is sales by region. So this is fairly straightforward. We click our region, we get a row of regions. And then I click sales and it goes to values. Now, what I've done so far is quite automated. I've clicked the box and it's magically gone to where I want it to go. But what happens if I want to say, have it so the products are in the columns? Well, if you go down to the field areas down here, and if you grab the products field and drag it over to columns and drop it there, you can see what I said earlier, which is that this pivot table report cannot overlap with another pivot table, because as a result of dragging products over the columns, this table is going to expand horizontally, and it's going to overlap with this one here. So what I'm going to do to demonstrate how you can solve that just real quickly is just to drag the region column somewhere else. The region pivot table, put products in columns, and there we go. We see a breakdown of our products by product category in a sort of horizontal table format. I could put them in filters. So instead of seeing them individually, I just go products and I click Ashen. And as a result, because Ashen's only a DIY product, I only get that. In all honesty, it'd probably be much better if I swap them around. So product category and filters, products down here. And then basically I can say, right, just show me DIY equipment. There we go, I just get those two. So you see you can manipulate the different fields to suit what you need it to do. Hierarchy is also important. If I click move down, it means that the products will take priority. So watch what happens. I click move down. Suddenly it's the product followed by the category, which isn't as nice looking. It's obviously a little bit more harder to read because they're not neatly aggregated. So it's important to make sure your hierarchies are correct. So that way then you get the most out of your pivot tables. Right, so I've talked a lot then about the general ways in which the fields work, but you can do a bit more with them. So for example, a nice little trick you can do, right, is use the find and replace tool to retitle the column headers for the values. So if I try to type in sales here now, what you'll see, I'll get this error where it says pivot field name already exists, which isn't ideal. That's because basically what you need to do is put in a space because sales exists somewhere else in the pivot table. And if I do that, it works. But that's really monotonous to do when it comes to renaming every single header that says sum of. So what you can do is if you hit Control F, or if you click the find and select magnifying glass in the top right of the home ribbon and click replace, you'll get this box. And if I type in sum of in this box and then say replace with nothing and click replace all, you can see now that it's made full replacements for me. It's included the spaces for me as well, which is nice and convenient. And so I renamed my headings. Then I can also rename the individual headings for the left columns. So I could call this products, product categories. I could call this one customers or buyers, what is more appropriate. And I could call this one region. Another thing then, it concerns the number format. So these are sales. Ideally, we'd like them to be in an accounting format so they show the pounds and if necessary decimal places, if that's what we want. Well, I could highlight them and then click the currency sign, but you can see it doesn't do it for everything, only what I've highlighted. So that's not really any good. What we can instead do is go to the values field in the pivot table fields properties box. And if I click on it, you can see the value field settings. Click that, and you can see now that I can actually change what is shown in this table. I can either count the amount of times a sale was made. I could have the average calculated instead. The point is that I can change what this column essentially shows. But underneath that all, I can also change the number format. And if I click accounting, click the decimal places to 0, and it's in pounds, so we click OK, and there we go. Our sales column has been reformatted automatically for us, and I can do this for every single one. So number format, accounting, 0, OK. And one more time just for consistency. So we click on the sale, so just one more time, we go to the values field, click on it, click value field settings, click number format, go to accounting, put the decimal places to 0, click OK, and there we go. So quite a while on activity 2, but I felt that once we've now got these pivot tables put together, you need to really understand what you can do with what you've got to make it appear the way you want it to appear as well. Now the last activity is to do with something called slices. So you can see these little drop-down boxes here, which are essentially filters. So I can have it so that only DIY equipment, light bulbs, paneling, whatever are shown. But there is another tool you can use called slices, which acts as a filter, but they can filter all the pivot tables at once. And they're a very useful presentation tool, especially if you're presenting the results to someone and you need to filter all the pivot tables to only show, say, products sold in Keyland that are DIY equipment, right? Just as an example. So how do you insert slices? Well, the first thing you want to go to is pivot table analyze. And what you'll see are two types of slices, insert slicer and timeline slicer. The timeline slicer will work when you've got time as part of your data. We haven't got dates in this sales report, so we can't use it here. But it's worth knowing that it exists and that you can only use it when you've got a measurement of time available to you. But it's very simple. You just click it, click the time data that you want to use, and a slicer will appear. For now, we're going to use the insert slicer. So I click insert slicer, and you can see I get a bunch of options. So what data do I want it to show? Well, we're told in the activity we want to create a slicer for region, product category, and product. So we click product category, product category, and region. Click OK. And there we go. We've got 4 slicers. Sorry. Now, the thing is, if I just click one of them, it only affects one of the pivot tables, which is contrary to what I said. So what you need to do at this point is connect them to all the pivot tables. So if I click report connections, okay, and I tick all of these, and I have to do it for every single one. So make sure that all of the slices are connected to the pivot tables. So one more time, you click on a slicer, you go up to this slicer ribbon, and you click on report connections. When you click that, you get the option to select what pivot tables you want this slicer to connect to. And now let's go back to that example. You want to see all purchases made in Keeland that are DIY equipment. So we click Keeland. There we go. We've got only one customer who is from Keeland, and they spent £1,851 at the company. Or they spent £1,851 buying stuff from us. But we want to specify it down to DIY equipment. So we click DIY equipment, and now we only get what DIY equipment was sold, which is Trivs. And we can see that this was the majority of the sales from this customer in this region. And then if you want to deactivate the filters, you just click this little X button with the filter symbol, and you reset the filters back to the way they were. And then the button next to the filter is called multi-select. And what this one does is it lets you decide which filters you want to keep on. So before, if I just click Keeland, it only lets me pick Keeland. And if I click Pranter, it moves to Pranter. But what if I want Keeland and Oxland? Well, the way that works is if you click the multi-select, then if I actually click the ones I don't want on. So I want to click Pranter, Shinodd, and Yevale. This will turn them off. And because it turns them off, it means the only ones that are left on is Keeland and Oxland, and that is what I'm left with. So that is part 1 of pivot tables. Have a go and play around with the workbook. Play around with the field options, because this is an important part of understanding pivot tables. By all means, move the different columns around, add new ones in, really get used to how these pivot tables look and the way their appearances change when you move fields around.
So that was just a short sample of what's on the course. We actually have over 7 hours of video tuition along with much, much more. But first, let me tell you a bit about the Excel Expert Certificate. Now, if you really want to prove to an employer that you're an expert in Excel, then this is the way to go. Because when you pass this exam, you'll earn a certificate that you can put on your CV, and that will make you stand out from the crowd. And it's an official Microsoft exam, so you can be assured that it's internationally recognized. And if you're ready, you could even sit that exam now and earn your certificate. But if you're not ready to sit the exam just yet, then our course is the thing for you. We've designed it specifically for finance professionals like yourself, so you can immediately apply what you've learned to your working life. The video is made up of video lessons and assessments, as well as a lot more, which I'll go through in just a moment. And as with all Astranti courses, you can sit it at your own pace whenever you like. It's all online. And if you're already qualified, then if you sit this course, it will count towards your continuing professional development requirements. It's worth 20 units. Okay, and again, as with all of our courses, it comes with a 14-day full money back guarantee. So if you're not happy with it in those first 14 days, you can return it, get your money back, no questions asked. So what's on the course? Well, we've got tuition videos, as mentioned already, and they will teach you the skills you need that you can apply in your real life, and also the skills you need to pass the exam. It comes with workbooks to help you really apply those skills to your real working life. Each module has an end of module test to make sure you have absorbed the key information that you need to go on and pass the exam. We have video solutions to take you through how to complete the tests to make sure you can maximize your marks. We also have a mock exam to get you ready for the real thing. And on top of all of that, you'll also be put onto our dedicated social network specifically for this course, so you can speak to other students and to our tutors if you have any questions. So if this sounds like something you might be interested in, then Join us, sign up today, and I look forward to having you on the course. And for a limited time only, you can get the full course for 20% off its usual price. So you get everything that I've just mentioned there for £120. If you go and sign up at Astranti, use the coupon code XL20 at the checkout. That will ensure you get that 20% off offer, but use it quickly because we're only running this for a short period.